Welcome again to another episode of My Hope is Built On, and I'm here with another, what I'd like to say is a new friend, because we get to meet new people. And so April Hanna is somebody that we've met through channels where we kind of reach out to one another to see if we can collaborate. And so April was one of those that I had reached out to, and we are now able to collaborate with one another on this podcast. And so I'm excited to have April here with us. April, I can never do anybody justice until on who they are, what they're all about. So, April, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, and we'll go from there.
Sure. Thanks so much, Dan. And thank you so much for having me as a guest. I'm really glad that I found your podcast, and I absolutely just love the fact that you are trying to bring more hope into the world and interviewing people and asking really such a deep question. So I'm really excited to be here. So, a little bit of background about myself. I'm a film producer, filmmaker. I've also been a licensed mental health therapist for over 20 years. So I've been a clinician, and during my own spiritual path and awakening, I ended up diving into a bunch of different spiritual studies, different ways that I could learn energetic healing from people. Many people are familiar with the term reiki.
Yeah.
I've become a reiki master teacher and began to integrate different healing modalities into my mental health practice. But back in 2008, I had this random phone call from a person that wanted to make a documentary about me. And I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. I'm following my spiritual path. I had just put my website out like that week, and I'm getting a phone call. I'm like, oh my God, a documentary? Like, I don't want to be on film, but let me see what this guy wants. So, in 2008, I ended up meeting a gentleman by the name of Michael Habernig, and the two of us went on to create our production company called Path 11 Productions. And we went on to make 3 documentary films. We have a podcast, Path 11 Podcast, and we just recently launched a spirituality network called Path 11 TV. But what's really interesting, and why I'm also on the show to talk about hope, is one of the things that we cover is the fear of death.
Mm-hmm.
So I have been investigating consciousness and is there life after death since 2008. And that's what my films are about. That's what the podcast is about. Because when you're also talking about hope, I think all of us are really hoping that something happens after we leave the physical body.
Yeah.
So, I have lots of different things to say about hope, but that has been an incredible journey, and probably something that we'll talk a little bit more about, because doing all of this investigation and researching and speaking to amazing healers and authors and nuclear physicists and scientists, they have given me so much hope to really believe that I am so much more than my physical body, and that consciousness does live on after we die. And so that's one major thing that I'm really hopeful about.
Okay.
So that's kind of a nutshell. I'll give you guys my website and stuff like that people can check out in the show notes to learn a little bit more about me. But I do a lot of different things. Like I said, I make films, make documentaries. I'm trying to help people lose their fear of death, help them to heal any PTSD, trauma, anxiety that they've been holding. If anything, I probably am helping a lot of people to try to have hope, in their life and in their future. So so I do a bunch of different things. Life is pretty fun.
That's good. Well, you keep yourself busy, and that's a really good thing. So you've already teed it up with the word hope, mentioning that, and that's pretty good. And so April, when you think of hope, what does hope mean to you?
Yeah. So I've really been thinking about this. When you sent me the questions, I was like, this is not how I thought I was probably going to answer, or talk about hope. So I really sat and I thought about it. And, I had a great conversation too with my fiance. And one of the things that we both came up with is hope is really unique to human beings.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like animals are, or like dogs are walking around saying, oh, I really hope I get a treat today.
Yeah.
It's something really unique to being a human being and to be able to have this feeling. But hope is also, to me, very ethereal.
Right.
It's something that's like out there. It's almost something that's really hard to measure.
Mm.
You might be able to measure somebody's motivation, how motivated they are, maybe some enthusiasm, but like hope just seems like something so vast that it's really hard to measure. It's like, I don't know if I've really could go around comparing your hope to my hope and who hopes better.
Right.
It really feels like it's a universal concept. I feel like it could also be considered a coping skill, right? With my mental health background, we can use hope as a coping skill in really tough times. But I also think hope is something innate in human beings. And for some, it could be that they really have the ability to access it, and others might really struggle to find that hope. And, being a mental health therapist for so many years, I have met a lot of people that felt very hopeless.
Yeah.
Um, so what does hope mean to me? When I really thought about it, and I thought about times that I had gone through myself that were really tough, and kind of asking myself, how am I going to get through this? Why are some of these things happening to me? Will I heal from this, situation? I guess for me, hope is believing in something that I cannot see.
Mm.
It's something that maybe I can't really grasp, but I can feel, something maybe intuitively, like, there just has to be something out there. And usually when you're hoping for something, and I don't know exactly what situation it could be in. It could be in any situation, right? Like, I hope my business turns out really well, or I hope I get a medical test come back and everything is negative, or, if somebody gets diagnosed with a cancer, that they hope that a miracle will happen and they'll be able to beat it. But to me, there's a level of hope that we embody that is also unseen. And there's something magical about that. And, with a lot of the work that I do with energy and consciousness and intuition, a lot of that is unseen. It's something that has to be felt.
Right.
It's very hard to prove. It's more something that you have to experience. And I kind of have been, thinking about hope after I got your questions, and thinking, wow, it's kind of very ethereal and magical as well.
Yeah.
So I feel like for me, hope has always been hanging on to something or an idea, or having a vision, and hoping with that idea, vision, or maybe it's a need or a want, that it'll come into some sort of physical manifestation.
Hmm.
So that's
Yeah.
kind of like where
that's
I
great.
started
Yeah.
to go with it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great. And again, one of the things that, like I told you already earlier on, is that my plan is never to try to convince somebody any differently than what they're feeling. I'm really wanting to hear the point of views as it relates to that. And so that was really good understanding of where you're coming from, and I appreciate that. And like I told you, one of the follow-up questions I always ask on this is, so then if with that definition of hope, then what is your hope built on then?
Yeah. I thought about that too, in great length too. And I came up with like maybe two or three things. I feel like the first thing, when I think about what my hope is built on, has to be the witnessing of other people having hope,
Mm.
or also witnessing really miraculous things happen in people's life. It could even be like, the Olympics just ended, right? If you think
Right.
about being a child and watching the Olympics, and then you can see somebody do that, you have the hope that maybe I'll be that runner someday, or I'll be able to be that gymnast. So I think for me, and I don't want to speak for other people, but my hope is really built on watching and witnessing other people, and other
Mm.
people succeed, and other people have resilience, right? I mean, that's another thing just in the world that I've lived in, with being a therapist and seeing people who really shouldn't have had hope, or really, like, I can be like just so surprised, like, why are people still hanging on and living when they have been brought to the depths of such darkness, or stripped of everything that you could possibly think of, and then they have to rebuild? Like, what is that innate characteristic in the human being that finds that will or that hope to keep going, to say something's got to be better?
Yeah.
So I have really in my life watched other people live, and really love to watch the people who are really inspiring, because that gives me hope.
Right.
And I really feel like if somebody can do something, then I can do it too.
Hmm.
And that might be why I've been successful just in business and being an entrepreneur, and having three different businesses. I mean, I'm not the best at it, but I've watched other people do it, and it's like, okay, well, if they can do it, then I can do it. If that person wrote a book, then I'm going to write a book. If that person can do a film, well, why can't I?
Yeah.
Never in
Yeah.
a million years, being a mental health therapist, did I think I was going to be a filmmaker and a producer. But
Yeah.
somehow I figured it out and did it. And it was like inspiring. And, I just thought about so many people that have had like no formal education in certain areas, and they just go and do things because they're moved by their heart.
Yeah.
And so, that's kind of like how I tend to live my life. So my hope is definitely has been built on watching others and
Yeah.
feeding off of the beauty of how you see hope come through and
Mm.
and manifest. And then my hope is also built on what I thought about was my free will and choice.
Mm.
Um, like with my fiance and I, we were talking about times when, both of us were in situations where you just kind of get to this point where maybe you are feeling so hopeless that you just throw your hands up and you're like, whatever, screw it,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like, okay, I'm just going to go and do whatever. If I'm this low, what's the chance that, something else is going to mess up? I'm just going to go and take a chance and do something.
Yeah.
But what I also feel is that when we can move into this place of hope during really desperate times or in situations where we feel confused, there is so much power in choice and free will. And our choices, I think, tend to lead to the ability to manifest the hope, right? To bring whatever we're hopeful for into fruition, into the physical plane, and to actually see that happen.
Right.
And some of it could be like, okay, I want to buy my dream house. Well, what does that look like? I'm hopeful for it. I could sit here and hope it all day and wish for it
Right.
and would love to live that lifestyle, but there's also action and there's choices and there's things that I can actively do with my power of choice to begin to live more of that hopeful life.
Mm.
So for me, I always really try to take 100% responsibility for things that are going right in my life and everything that's going wrong in my life. And when I have experienced times either of, sadness and grief or depression or burnout or like, oh my God, what am I doing with my life? Those questions like, what's going on? Why am I here? I realize that I have a choice to choose differently, to find that hope, to shift my thinking. And if this isn't working, well, let me look at all of my choices that I have. So I feel like choices, watching other people, and knowing that I have free will.
Yeah.
And I would say that's what my hope has been built on over the years.
Yeah, no, that's good. I really like the fact that you introduced the idea of free will into that conversation, because in our choices, it's a, I actually, I had about 4 years ago, I think 5 years ago now, I had a triple bypass. And, even in the recovery phase of that, I could have wallowed in the pain. I could have wallowed in the discomfort. I could have wallowed in the, and I could have woe is me. But I'm one of those, I don't like to be sick. I don't like to be unhealthy. I pushed myself, to do that. And I had those choices to do that. And it wasn't a hopeless situation. I didn't see myself in a hopeless state because I knew I had the ability to change the outcome of where I was at by just exerting myself to push myself beyond the boundaries of where I was at and capable of doing. And so I get what you're saying in that area. I think that's amazing. And I think that's so true. I always tease, and I hope my dad doesn't listen to this podcast because I'm going to say something, but I remember growing up when he'd get a cold, he would just sit there and waller with the sniffles, and I just say, get up, move, it's a cold. It's you're not, and I've seen so many people that do that just on the simple things. It's like, instead of making the conscious choices, saying, hey, listen, I can actually change the outcome of this situation by changing my outlook on how I see it as, this is a disabling me, instead of saying, no, I can actually enable myself. And even if my inability is not there, I still can push myself in other areas to excel and come and rise above it. And find hope in it. So I appreciate you mentioning the free will aspect of that, because it is so true. You mentioned a lot of great things, and even just the ability to see hope in other people. And that's one of the areas where you've been able to, again, I'm a faith-based person. I've been through Bible college. I do some pastoring and things of that nature. So, one of the things when I talk with people is borrow my hope then in this moment.
Beautiful.
Borrow my hope then. If you're hopeless, then just borrow my hope. And my hope shows up. It's not to borrow it in the sense of I'm going to have you become like me, but it's to borrow. I'm investing in you, and I'm going to pour in because I see the potential in you, or I see the potential of what can come out of this. and I'm hopeful for you, and I want you to borrow that hope at this point. Um, Talk to me a little bit about some of the patients and some of the people that you go through, because I know one of the things you shared with me is kind of the idea of even just coping with death and stuff like that. So
Mhm.
talk to me a little bit about that and how you try to bring hope in those situations in helping folks.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for sharing your story too about the triple bypass, because what I love about that story is you also, show a true example of how the human beings, we are so much stronger than we think we are,
Yeah.
and it isn't until we go through something like that where it's kind of like, oh my God, can I get through this? Am I strong enough to do this? Okay, I have to make some big changes, big choices to make, and you power through,
Right.
so, and it's great. And I think it's so important when people are feeling hopeless, like you said, to lean into other people's stories and how other people got through maybe exactly something that you're going through.
Hmm.
And similar to the clients that I've worked with, I mean, I specialize mostly in post-traumatic stress, anxiety, and depression. Those seem to be like the top three things that a lot of people, you really can't walk on this earth and live on this earth without experiencing some sort of trauma.
Right.
This is a place where we learn and grow, and that's how we learn and grow best. And so with giving people hope, especially around grief, I think it is just that. It's knowing that there are other people out there who have lost loved ones,
Hmm.
when, if I'm dealing with a parent that has lost a child, they're not unique to the fact that there are many people who have lost children.
Right.
I think it's one of the greatest losses. It's very challenging, but there's like wonderful stories out there. There's books. There also seems to be, not only with grief, but I would say really any traumatic event, it's like, what do we do with that? And how do you use that and a part of your story to become an inspiration for others, and going through that, when you're in the depths of it, it just can feel very paralyzing. You can feel very numb. It can feel like, I don't think that I can go on.
Yeah.
These feelings and these emotions feel so heavy that it almost feels like it's hard to just breathe.
No, I get
Grief
it.
really makes it hard to breathe sometimes.
Yeah.
So, and some of the counseling and stuff like that is really working with the thoughts, really helping people to reframe situations. And in the work that I've done over the years and all the research and work that I've done with Path 11 Productions, I really do believe that there really aren't any coincidences, that I don't think God or the universe is out to get us and hurt us when we're going through really tough times. I really feel that we are given challenges in life to help us to become more of the vibration of love. What are we going to do? How are we going to use these tough times? Every single person, whether they were a client or not, anyone that I've ever talked to, and I bet you if I even said to you, if you could change going through bypass surgery, having triple bypass, would you go back in time and change it? And most people say, man, that was really tough to get through, but I wouldn't change a damn thing about it because it's made me who I am.
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know and that's another thing to have hope for. It's like when you've been through something and you saw that you came out of it the other end and you survived
Yeah.
and you were okay, and you think, wow, I matured through that, or, oh, I really changed my health habits. I actually became, a better person. I had more empathy, or whatever the case may be.
Right.
Then you begin to reframe and take a look at situations and obstacles that happen to you, not as doom and gloom and dread and, oh, life is happening to me, but you really move into this reframe of, life is happening for me.
Right.
How can I use this? Why is this showing up for me? How can I use this to help others? What is the lesson for me? What's the assignment that this keeps showing up for me? So that's kind of how I will use hope and work with people and work with a lot of my clients, whether it's grief, trauma, PTSD, or anxiety. It's really trying to find that beautiful strength of each human being to let them
Mhm.
know that they can persevere, and that this is a stepping stone, and this is
Yeah.
building character, and this is helping you. In some ways, when we go through really tough stuff, it kind of makes us look at all the things that we used to worry about, and like you realize that, like, don't sweat the small stuff, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
What's the big stuff all about?
Yeah.
And sometimes that trauma can really refocus us.
Yeah. No, I get it. And it's funny, you've mentioned a couple things, and then one that you mentioned, and when you were just talking was that really resonated is especially with child loss. My wife and I lost twin boys in the 27th week of pregnancy, and she had to stillbirth both of them. And, but as a reason, and that was a trying time, that was a difficult time.
Sure.
And, but I had two more children after that. And I would have knew that was our stop. We wanted three kids, and those two coming would have been made it three. And I wouldn't have had these other two. And these other twos have been a joy and a blessing in my life that beyond anything I could ever ask or imagine, And so again, it's really, when you're persevering through these things, is understanding, that things can come out for the good, even in the midst of those challenges. And so again, I appreciate you mentioning a lot of the things that you're sharing today, because it is something that we all need to really think about. I don't know what, right now is that people I think are in more of a hopeless state today than usual, especially when we look at the world around us. And, I think I don't feel hopeless, because I do see the opportunity for hope in the midst of all of this. But what would you say to somebody who's looking at the world and just saying, man, it just doesn't look like it's getting any better? And, and how would you help them reframe or reshape their thoughts to be more hopeful, and not to see the cup half empty, but seeing it more as half full?
Yeah. So a couple things. I'm just going to write some notes down here. So one of the things would be, well, one of the things that I've noticed, especially about this pandemic, and it seems to be innate in human nature, is that we cannot tolerate change, yet change is the only constant.
Yeah.
So we've kind of been thrown into something that we have all lost control in some way, right?
Yeah.
Everybody was going about their lives. Bam, we get thrown into this pandemic. It's lasting way longer than people, I think, had hoped for,
Yeah.
right? But we were hanging on to that hope, thinking, okay, this is going to be over. But at the same time, when I look at, and I've, again, so many of my clients, especially those with anxiety, people say, I don't do well with change. I'm a control freak. I don't like change at all. And I'm thinking, like, that's all like living here on earth is, And I love some of the philosophers that say just to be more like nature. There's that quote out there where, like, nature never rushes, yet everything always is accomplished,
Right.
But as human beings, we're either trying to rush things, stop things, control things. And I think it's a beautiful lesson for us as human beings, if we can, to stop resisting and go more in the flow of what is happening. So I think in this time when we're feeling a little hopeless, you also have to look at your relationship with control and change.
Yeah.
And if you can't begin to change that, or find more ease in the unknown and really letting go of some of control, if you can't do that, this is going to be a hard time for you.
Yeah.
And that's another thing I've been trying to help my clients do, and even myself do, because there's a lot of things that were put on hold that I was like, I don't want my life to stop right now. Like, come on, this is a horrible timing for my life. I had grand plans, but that also said, it's like, okay, well, now's not the time, right? You kind of have to adapt and change to what's going on. And as human beings, we actually thrive in trauma and environments like this. Like, we are wired for times like this.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I feel like, really helping people, coaching people about what is their relationship with change, how can they become more fluid, how can they kind of go more with the flow. I'm not going to get too much on this soapbox, but I think the more that we, another thing that can be very helpful in a time like this is also limiting the amount of exposure that you have to the news.
Yeah.
There's a difference between watching the news and being informed. It's important to be informed.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of stuff in our mainstream media that really encourages a fear-based mentality and a fear-based belief system and a way to live. So I would say to a lot of people need to detox from news, not information. Information is important. But, if you watch the news every single day, a couple times a day, a couple hours a day, I'll tell you right now, you're going to get your fire. you're going to get your rape, you're going to get your car accident on the main highway, you might get a kidnapping, you're definitely going to get stuff about COVID, you're going to get the political stuff. And then like the 6 o'clock news is going to tell you about the new accident that happened, in rush hour traffic, and the burglary that happened the night before, and the fire. So if you really sit back and watch that, you're going to see that feels like a really scary world to live in.
Yeah.
So, the other thing that I would say to people that are feeling hopeless is going back to the control. What do you have control of right here, right now? And it may seem like, God, this world just doesn't seem like it's going to get any better. But if you just stopped and kind of came closer and zoomed out a little bit and zoomed into your own life and walked outside your door, it's like, have you even thanked that the sun came up today? Like maybe we should be more worried about the fact if the sun decides not to show up, the planet will completely just be destroyed in 18 hours if the sun doesn't rise, So when you go back to mindfulness practice, the simplicity that the sun is out, the weather is beautiful, there are still flowers in bloom, I can still breathe fresh air. And you come back to those smaller things to have gratitude and to be thankful for. Yes, this whole thing in the world feels overwhelming, but if we go back to the oneness or understanding that we are one with God and one with consciousness, that it's our also job to find kind of calm, because we are a little bit of that ripple in the pond. If I can find more peace during this pandemic, I know at some level that I cannot comprehend or see, again, something that can't be seen, but I know I'm contributing to balancing a little bit of the fear and the anger and just, everything that just doesn't feel good that's going on right now. My duty is to try to find that calm, find the calm in the storm. So those would usually be my top 3 or 4 things that I would talk to people about to try to find hope during this time. And the other thing about your story about, losing the twins, and I'm sure that this is a great example that you gave too. Hindsight is 2020, right? Sometimes when we're in it, we can't see or understand why is this happening. But years later, you can look back and say, I wouldn't have had it any other way, and we will probably look back at this pandemic. And like you, I can see a lot of beautiful things that are changing, that are happening, different ways that we're learning how to communicate. And, there's other endless possibilities and things that can advance us, into the future and maybe in a better way. And right now, that's really tough to see because it hasn't unfolded yet. Give it 10, 15 years and we look back and we might say, oh my gosh, how did we even function like we were functioning before the pandemic?
No, it's so true.
So hindsight 2020, big thing, especially with hope and experiences that we go through.
I always tell my kids, I said, hey, you have something to celebrate. The fact that your 2 feet hit the floor is a good thing, And so and you can start every day off with just in the right perspective if you just recognize the fact that those 2 feet hit the floor, And
absolutely.
And I think that's such an amazing thing. I love what you were saying though, and that is true. Is what you're basically saying is that life goes on and life is full of change. It's full of inconsistencies. It's full of challenges. It's full of things that you're going to face. It's got beauty. It's got everything, right? And so you got the mixture of all those things in there. And I'm just trying to summarize in everything that we've talked about. But one of the things I teach a subject on, and it's about how to create atmospheric shifts by changing the air you bring. And the air, I define it as, is your actions, your inactions, and your reactions. And so we can create atmospheric shifts. And in a time like this, we can create those atmospheric shifts just by what you said. Our free will is our actions, our inactions, and our reactions to situations. And so, I totally agree with you and I am big on individual responsibility. I think that the biggest thing that if we would all just be more introspective of what I'm bringing into the air, again, my actions and inactions, and take responsibility for those things, then we would see we can see a much more positive shift in our world today, because we wouldn't be blaming the pandemic. We wouldn't be blaming the leaders of this country. We wouldn't be blaming, it would be taking responsibility for ourselves.
Absolutely. And I'm
Yeah.
totally going to steal that air thing. And what is it again? It's actions,
Inactions and reactions.
inactions, and reactions. That's awesome. I absolutely love that.
Yeah.
Yes, I couldn't agree with you more. And blaming is kind of, I will say, nice, right? In some ways, judgment and blame, not my problem, not my
Exactly.
fault. I'm just going to point the finger over there. And then like the focus shifts off of you, and you don't have to take responsibility for anything. And
Right.
I mean, that has been, I would say, in one of my studies with, a teacher, and that was one of the biggest teachings. You are 100% responsible for the way that you respond and react to everything. And I was so pissed off to hear that. I was
Yeah.
like, no, wait a second, hold on.
Yeah.
You mean to tell me? But when I really sat with that and practiced that and learned that, like so many areas of my life changed, because when
Yeah.
you really take ownership and you're no longer blaming any of your emotions on other people or problems or situations, and you're just really saying, okay, I'm responsible for how I'm going to choose to react. How do I want to react?
Mm.
I think most human beings, even the angriest people, they really don't want to be in that state. It's a
Yeah.
really hard place to be, angry all the time,
Yeah.
sad all the time. That's not. But when you get empowered to say, okay, you do have a choice.
Yeah.
There are choices here. That I think can really shift people up and out if they want to accept that, but not everybody does.
And it's funny you mentioned that, even with all that, is that because I do a lot with neuroscience as well, and the really we have the capacity to bring about better health in our own lives, and anger does not perpetuate good health. If you're feeling, you can start to really feel ill as a result of that, and you're bringing that on yourself as a result of it. And so if we don't take that responsibility and really self-correct, then it's not going to, we're not going to get the results that we're looking for, and we'll constantly be miserable as a result of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think people are learning more and more now, the mind and body, connection, the emotional connections, what that does to us, what that does to our health.
Yeah.
Just like a quick personal story, and because I've been studying death, in 2019, my mom actually had tragically died.
Mm.
And, she was hit by a car. She was crossing the street. And, here I am, this, investigator of life after death and all of this. And it's then right after she died, I was, doing my grief work in my own therapy, doing
Yeah.
a grief counseling, and then the pandemic hit. And then all of a sudden I really had to show up and be really present for my clients, so I kind of put my grief on hold. And, and then a little while later, the grief started to manifest physically in my body because I wasn't
Mm.
moving it out. I just was like, I'm going to put it over here. And then I had like a lot of mysterious issues going on with my lungs. My pulmonology tests, everything came back completely fine, was getting blood work done. I'm like, what's going on? And there's a part of me that knows, okay, have I really dealt with my grief?
Right.
And I
Right.
understand, like in Eastern medicine, they say grief is held in lungs. But my body started to say, hey, April, you need to start dealing with this, like it's now time to release it, because our bodies are like sponges for our experiences, and stuff can really manifest physically
Yeah.
in our body if we don't start to really unpack and pay attention to the emotions that we're having or choosing not to have, or feeling numb about them.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so when you talk about anger and when you talk about stress, like people can make the connection, stress kills you because you can have a heart attack or
Yeah.
whatever the case may be, but it's like, yeah, so can grief.
Yeah.
It's like, how many people have lost their partner after being married for so many years and they die within that same year?
Yeah. Exactly.
We are so much more than just the physical body. Like, we have to take really good care of our emotions and the experiences that we go through in order to keep this physical body like
Yeah.
supporting us, to holding the spirit to be able to live here on earth.
Yeah.
So yeah, hearing that there's major connections with our emotions and our physical body.
So I have one final question I'm going to ask you, and with your quest for afterlife, where have you landed?
Well, I thought I landed somewhere, but then after my mom passed, I was like, I know nothing. I still know nothing. Well, where I am right now is that I really do believe that consciousness does not die.
Okay.
That we continue, but possibly in different forms. in a different form, because we're energy, and energy doesn't die. It just changes form. I've come to believe that there is a divine intelligence that knows way more than any of us,
Mhm.
and that life is orchestrated pretty beautifully. And I feel like whoever the divine creator is, that divine creator is always rooting for us and hoping that what it brings us through is helping us to evolve, to become more loving, not to de-evolve and to become more hate. And I do believe in, I don't even want to call it an afterlife anymore. I believe that life just continues in some form, but just maybe not in this physical body. And I feel that what I've learned and have come to believe is that I think that our souls come into the physical body for certain experiences, because this is a great classroom to teach us many things very quickly.
Yeah.
And I do believe just in that divine presence, and really feel that I may not know exactly where I'm going when I leave this physical body, but I know that the spirit will be somewhere, because I've had so much communication, with my mom since she's passed, just other stories of, situations with clients that has totally proven to me that the consciousness of somebody that was once in a physical body can be accessed. You can get information, you can get their opinions, you can hear what they need to say. But it doesn't mean that they stay there.
Yeah.
It's just like, it's a piece of them and a piece of that consciousness. So I am still, since 2008, I'm still learning. And I feel like the more that I learn, the less I know, because
Yeah.
I don't really ever want to have a strong belief system in any direction, because I feel like that can close me off to
Yeah.
other infinite possibilities. So I would say I'm still learning. And
Yeah.
that's why, we created Path 11 TV, because that's what I'm doing. I'm investigating, I'm creating films, I'm talking to other people. It's kind of like how you're talking to all these
Yeah.
people on your podcast. I am interviewing so many people about life after death, consciousness, scientists, what is consciousness? What is this energy? Who is God? Where is God? What is this? In the hopes to help people lose their fear of death and kind of answer that question, or at least give them, I don't know, just more information to make a more informed decision about maybe what they
Yeah.
believe.
So I will say that with all you just said, obviously, where I come from, and so I'm firm in my faith in terms of I believe in a heaven and a hell, obviously, and I really, and one of the things I just appreciate about, one of the things I've never wanted to be, though, is I don't want to be so dogmatic that it's my way or the highway, and I wanted to hear other people's. That's, like I said, that's what the purpose of the show was.
Mhm.
I want to be able to hear your express point of view, because without that, then there's no way that you and I can actually work with one another. And I don't
Right.
believe in division, and I don't in disunity in that respect. And so I appreciate you sharing your thoughts in that area. I really do.
Yes. Thanks,
And I
Dan.
thank you for that. But I really enjoyed listening to you, April. You really shared a wealth of information. I think our listeners are going to really enjoy what you've had to say and share today. And so I really appreciate you being on here. Um, as we already said at the beginning as well, when you were mentioning it, everything you need to know about April will be in the show notes, and so we'll have all the links to websites and anything else that they need to get a hold of you or follow you and listen to what you have going on. But thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. And I just have a wonderful rest of your day.
Yes. Thanks, Dan. And we are going to give your listeners just a free code. You can put it in the show notes. It's podcast 30 to get 30% off their subscription to Path 11 TV. Then
Okay.
go to path11tv.com. There's a 7-day free trial. They can check it out. But if they would like to subscribe monthly or annually, just use podcast 30. That's specifically for your listeners, and they can get 30% off.
Sounds great. I really appreciate it, April. You have a wonderful rest of your day.
You too. Thanks, Dan.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.